Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat. I'm your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you are joining me today for another great episode and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And today we're going to be talking all about coaching, which is an integral part of talent development. So many of you have told me that you've been implementing coaching in your organizations or working on it or figuring out what's the best way forward, or maybe trying to create a coaching culture so that your managers or leaders are coaching more. And that is what this conversation is going to be all about. My guest today is Dr. David Morelli, who is the co-founder and CEO of OwlHub, an innovative platform dedicated to transforming leadership development and coaching. As a recognized expert in organizational psychology and leadership assessment, David created the Respect Coaching Styles Assessment, which is a groundbreaking tool that helps coaches and leaders identify and leverage their natural coaching strengths. Introduced in 2022, it's being adopted to Silicon Valley startups and Fortune 500 companies, including Capital One, Allstate, and others. And his work has earned them the most innovative and most valuable to the coaching profession awards at the International Coach Federation conferences for Respect Coaching Styles. David has a 4.9 out of 5.0 facilitator rating, hosts the #1 Owlcast podcast with 1.2 million subscribers, and holds an executive MBA and PhD in business administration. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Andy. I'm excited to be here with you.
I'm excited to have you here as well. And I want to add that I have gotten to know David over the last few months. We were introduced by a mutual friend, Helly, who has been a guest on this podcast as well and a longtime member of the talent development think tank community. And I knew right away in talking with you, David, that you had something magical on your hands with this Respect Coaching Styles assessment. I was really impressed with your thoughtfulness and the research that went into this, and then even invested in going through the Respect Coaching Styles Train the Trainer certification program, and really loved how you put everything together there to make sure that people are not just learning, but giving a chance to practice. And you seem to really accommodate people's different styles and meet people where they are instead of trying to force people to what they need, what you think they need to be doing, which is probably the sign and hallmark of a really great coach.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And having you in that program was just amazing. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you brought and all of that stuff. And clearly to this community as well. I mean, people look to you and say, hey, what's going on that we should know about? And thanks for hosting me.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us about your journey to founding OwlHub and what inspired you to focus on coaching and leadership development?
Yeah. So I've been an executive coach and in leadership development for 30 years. So I started off my career. I was a semi-pro volleyball player, and I was in California. And there was an organization that I started working for. I was doing just like the sales and marketing and all the sort of like just beginning of career kinds of jobs while I was pursuing volleyball. And I started to informally coach the CEO because he saw me with volleyball. I played two Olympians at the peak of my career there.
Hmm.
And he was like, hey, will you coach me on performance? And so I was like, sure. Right. And so we started coaching. And then he said, hey, would you run strategy and talent and all that stuff for our organization, the talent development function in particular, and help all of our 200 employees succeed? Right. And I thought, sure, right? Like, what do I know? I'm 20 years old.
Yeah.
So, so I did, and I took my first coaches training back then, and so from that moment, it really captivated this sort of helping people fulfill their potential
Mm.
in their lives, in the workplace, in sort of how they show up as leaders. That really is sort of the pulse behind why I do what I do, even again a couple decades later. And so from that point, as I grew through my career, you know, one organization helped them grow from 35 million to 3.5 billion in 7 years. I run executive education at the University of Denver's Business School, building programs for Charles Schwab and Salesforce and Comcast and others. But it was really when I did my PhD and focused my research on studying 16 of the world's best coaches to figure out how they go about their coaching interactions. And what I discovered were these 7 distinct styles
Mm.
that we all use in our conversations. it's what makes great conversations happen, are these 7 styles all sort of woven together. And that's really sort of the foundation of Owl Hub and the company that I co-founded.
So there's a lot out there about coaching and the importance of people getting coaching to achieve more in their careers. And a lot of companies bring in coaches at the higher levels, right? And then they can also hire outside coaching at scale through companies like BetterUp, and certainly companies that are trying to create more of a coaching culture or get their managers to coach more. What have you learned about coaching in organizations over your career? What's working well and what's not working well? Where does it maybe break down?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, most organizations, if you think about, can you hire enough coaches from the outside in order to give everybody a coach? And most leaders realize no, right? We can hire coaches from the outside as in external coaches. Those coaches, usually there's a certain top of the organization that gets access to those types of coaches. Then there's sort of some stuff that's a little more sort of mid-level outsourced or whatnot, but still you can't at scale bring coaching literally to everybody. But the manager has the unique ability to deliver coaching. They understand the work that's being done in the organizational context. They intimately understand the strengths and weaknesses of each of their different team members. And they're in a great position to bring out the best in their people if they take a coaching approach to this sort of management role. And what's interesting is today, a lot of the managers, I'll call it organization of task duties, are starting to be able to be at least somewhat replaced by AI. Right. So it's almost like the managing of the work, the day-to-day stuff. AI is going to more and more be taking over that function. And so what does the manager do? Well, ideally, the manager is helping people to perform at their best, to grow in their careers and their skill sets. They're helping them solve more complex issues. They're helping them, think more critically and expand their thinking and be more innovative. And even more than that, it's the relationship matters. If you think about some people, some people think about, AI, and is AI going to be a better manager than their manager? Well,
Right.
I would say to the degree that they don't have emotional baggage and or like the quality of the relationship, if you have a bad relationship as a manager with people, it's why people leave. But
Yeah.
it's also why people stay.
Yeah.
Is if they have a great relationship with their managers. And so this really gives people the tool set to be great at leading others, at managing them, having the relationship that people really want and want to work for.
Yeah.
And so that's what the respect styles do.
There's so much potential there. And I'm curious, like, where do you see that breaking down? I know you've done some research. You've looked at the Gallup research and Google's projects and research. And I think that we all know and agree that coaching has a potential to really unlock a lot of performance. But the problem is most managers don't get much guidance or training on coaching, right? In fact, I've often said, I've done this podcast many times, I think the number one challenge in talent development is people being promoted for doing a great job as an individual contributor, but
Yeah.
then not getting any guidance on how to be a great manager.
Yeah. It's funny because, most people's exposure to being a good coach is, well, what did their manager do with them? And how do they coach them? And so they just turn around to do that, or they go, "Oh, that was so terrible. I'm going to do the opposite." Right. But I liken it to like a bad game of telephone, right? Like a good. Do you remember that game, the
Yeah.
telephone game, where
Yeah.
somebody starts off with a message, a clear message in the beginning, and then it gets
Right.
passed from person to person. You kind of listen to it devolve. At the end, you're like, "What even happened to that?"
Yeah. What is that?
Yeah, but a good game of telephone starts off with a clear message. The unfortunate part about how most coaching is learned in organizations is you learn from the manager who never got training in coaching either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because you never started off with a clear message, what is coaching and what is good coaching never got really defined. And it's not the same as being a professional coach when we think about being a coach as a leader or as a manager,
Mm-hmm.
because professional coaching, again, where I think coaching has basically been around for about 30 years or so, which is when I began. And so I watched this industry kind of grow up. And professional coaching has this weird thing where you're not in charge of their work, right? You don't tell them what to do. It's all about them, not about any of your needs. And you're trying to avoid conflicts of interest. If you think about coaching as a manager, you determine their work, you can hire and fire them, right? You have clear, I'll call it investment in them being successful because that also reflects on your success, right? There's all kinds of things that are different. And yet, most people sort of go, well, like, what is this thing called coaching in this management role? Ideally, it's helping people succeed and be at their best and get all of their best for them, for you, and for the organization. And you have to use lots of different tools like these styles that I'm sure we'll talk about in order to do that. And so what is good coaching? It turns out that by studying 16 of the world's best coaches and then bringing that back into the leadership context, we've uncovered that there are 7 patterns behind what great coaches do.
Well, let's talk about those patterns. That's what led you to developing the RESPECT acronym and the 7 coaching styles and the assessment that goes along with it. I have taken the assessment, full disclosure, I've taken the assessment. I have invested in going through your certification program to really learn these so that I can use them in my own coaching and bring them into organizations. I see them as a really powerful way and a complement to any other coaching certification or framework that people might have because it kind of widens the aperture and allows us to be more flexible and accommodate people and how and where they want to be coached. But I'd love for you to walk through the RESPECT coaching styles and the research or reason behind them and how we can use them in organizations.
Absolutely. So RESPECT, again, like you said, is an acronym, and it stands for the rallier, which is kind of that goal-oriented, you're driving towards accomplishment. The educator, which is you're building up knowledge and skill sets for people. The strategist is you're helping them solve problems. Provocateur is you're helping them to think critically and get down to that deeper truth. The explorer helps them expand their thinking. The confidant creates that empathy and safety. And then the transformer helps them become that best version of them and reach their full potential. And so those 7 moves, you can boil it down to literally behind every question we ask or statement we make already, there are these styles present. And so it's about learning, hey, how do these show up in our language today? And then what are the things that we may lean into too much? What are the things we lean away from? And how can we use these consciously in order to create the best outcomes for everyone? And that's really where the power is we've never had a sort of language set for understanding how we go about these things already, and then how to do them more consciously and more effectively. And that's really where the RESPECT styles fit in is bringing out the best in other people through these conversations that are intentionally powerful.
And how would you relate this to other coaching frameworks that exist out there? For example, the GROW framework is probably the most popular, well-known among talent development professionals or coaches as a framework to use. There's obviously a few others that people look to, but there's a lot of popular frameworks out there. How does this maybe relate or complement those styles?
Yeah, it's interesting. The GROW model, a lot of people, they're kind of like, oh yeah, it's simple, right? And it's like what I just came from a coaching conference as well, and then right before that a talent development conference, and people are like, GROW, it's a good starter model, right? And I'm like, yeah, So if you're not familiar with GROW, I'll walk it through here real quick. So the first question, the G, is basically what's your goal, and so that would be a question that you would ask somebody. Well, what's your goal is actually a rallier question. Right. And then the next one, the R, is what's the reality? So what's the reality that you're facing today? This is more of an explorer question. Well, what's the reality? What's going on? Like, tell me about this, right? So that explorer question is the next one. And then the O is what are your options? And oftentimes it's framed in terms of strategist, meaning what are your options in order to help you solve this thing that you're struggling with? And then the last one is what's either the way forward or what action will you take or whatnot.
Mhm.
That goes back to the rallier. And so starts and ends with rallier and throws explorer and strategist in the middle. Essentially, that's 3 of the 7 styles. And so it's good, right? And it's a pre-prescribed order. But what happens when the conversation veers away from, I'll call it the well-worn path of these
It's just
basically 4 questions?
it's very problem and goal oriented. Like there's a thing going on. How are you gonna achieve your goal? It doesn't account for people having big feelings or wanting to go somewhere in their career or having other adjacent challenges that might be close to it. Like there needs to be more flexibility around it.
Yeah. And again, it's a good starting point for people to have like here 4 questions, right? But it misses the richness of being able to have the conversation adapt to however it unfolds, right? And that's what respect allows you to do is kind of weave in and out of all 7 of these things. There's other popular frameworks, the coaching habit, right? And Michael in his book, he says here are the 7 things you should always say as in a management conversation to have a good, you know,
Yeah.
type of coaching conversation. It's a great book, uh, and it actually addresses one of the things that managers are mostly low in, which is the explorer style. Most of the questions are explorer questions, right? And so in that book, it's great. It's a prescription, but what happens when you wander off the prescription? And so that's what this allows you to do is to dynamically adapt to any situation that comes up to bring out the best in other people and have the conversation feel authentic and rich.
So there's 7 coaching styles, which I've gotten to be quite familiar with, and it's a great framework to be able to bounce around and ask different types of questions when you are coaching someone. How does understanding one's natural or their proclivity to use different coaching styles help them improve their effectiveness as a coach or leader? Because you do have an assessment that someone can take. It takes 5 minutes, and to help them better understand their own coaching styles.
Yeah, we overuse certain styles. Most of us overuse a couple different styles. The data says that it's 2 to 3 styles that we use the most. We have sometimes like a medium use of 2 or 3, and then we're usually 2 or 3 that are low. And in the combination of our strengths, if you will, our uses and overuses often, and our underuses or our low ones, it usually creates problems for us. And most of the communication problems that we suffer from are actually from overuse and underuse of various styles. I'll give you an example. Most leaders one-on-ones, they say, "Hey, welcome. Hey, how you doing? Right? How you feeling? Right?" And they sort of start off with the confidant, like a couple minutes in the beginning,
Mhm.
and then they say, "Great, let's talk about what you've accomplished since last we spoke in our one-on-one. And so let's go over your numbers and hey, where is this project and how are you doing with that?" You're
Mhm.
in the rallier style. And then people are trying to uncover the problems for them to fix, right? And so they end up in the strategist style saying, okay, well, let's troubleshoot this. And the manager usually makes the mistake of, as in that strategist style, solving it for them rather than with them or
Mhm.
having them solve it for themselves. But they end up going sort of troubleshooting, problem solving. Then they go, cool, what actions are you going to take to go back to the rallier? And then they say, hey, I have an open door policy. Let me know if you need anything, right? And they kind of go
Yep.
back to the confidant. And so that represents 3 of the 7 styles. But what you didn't get in that is you didn't get any skill set development, i.e., the educator. You
Mhm.
didn't get any critical thinking, i.e., the provocateur. So if you're problem solving, what happens when the other person is the problem? Or
Mm.
their lack of ownership or right their excuses or whatnot, that's going to be addressed by the provocateur. Or they're making assumptions about what is or isn't happening or should or shouldn't be addressed. Then the explorer is they're not really going into thinking about it differently or hey, tell me about your thoughts behind this thing, right? So they're not really going into that, and then they're not developing the career of the person or helping them think about who they want to be. And so because of those lack of styles, people feel like work just becomes work. It kind of becomes monotonous, and
Mhm.
it's not bad. it's just not fulfilling. And because it's not fulfilling, people start getting a little antsy. In fact, we have research where we studied 234 US full-time workers. And in that study, we asked them why they left their previous job, right? Because these are all people who had recently quit their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the number one reason was actually directly related to styles. It was, and each of the styles were represented. So, to what degree is your manager not helping you accomplish your goals? Which is they weren't using enough rally, or how much were they not building your skill sets? And that would be the educator,
Mm-hmm.
or helping you solve problems. And so 90% of people ended up leaving their jobs because one or more of the styles were missing. Meaning, in aggregate, our lack or poor use of styles is behind why people quit, why they disengage, right? Why they are really unfulfilled in their roles. So either they quit overtly or covertly, right? That sort of quiet quitting phenomenon. Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people are looking for, or managers or leaders could potentially engage or get more performance out of people by leveraging a lot of the different styles. When you take the assessment, you notice, like you said, where you may be high or low. One interesting thing that I've learned going through this is that while a lot of managers might be high in the educator style, a lot of professional coaches or someone who may be brought in to coach someone like me tend to be low in educator, which has ended up being my lowest when I took the assessment, because I was taught, right, that a good coach only asks questions and doesn't do any teaching or get into that type of stuff. And what I learned from working with you is like, no, there's a time and a place for all of these things. And it's about really being flexible to what the coachee or the direct report needs at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you say that. So I recently interviewed the CEO of the International Coaching Federation, ICF, and we talked about knowledge and how important sharing your relevant knowledge is. And that's actually a change that's happened in the coaching world. I just came from one of their conferences, the sort of every 2 years
Mm-hmm.
they put on this giant conference. And I just came from there, and the big uproar at the conference was that they've now said that sharing your knowledge as a coach is important to do. And there's a whole new competency around it. And people are starting to go, well, wait a second, this hasn't been historically what coaching has been about.
Yeah.
And yet, 16 of the world's best coaches that I worked with, 15 out of the 16 of them showed interview evidence of the educator style. 15 out of the 16 also showed interview evidence of the strategist style. And those were the top two, tied for first place, styles that people use. And so when we think about coaching as it's been trained and taught thus far, even in working with master certified coaches, they say, yeah, there's the coaching that we've agreed thus far on as far as what it is, and the styles that were sort of, I'll call it, missing previously are the ones they over-indexed on. And then there's the coaching that you actually do in practice. So there's the coaching that you do to pass the test, and then there's coaching that happens in the real world, right? And so we need all of these styles. But if you don't know where your strengths and weaknesses are, where do you begin? And that's really for talent development, right? If you think about, if I ask you this question, how does every single leader in your organization coach today? How would you quantify that?
Yeah. Well, no idea.
We can't, right? We have no way of measuring that. And then if you were to ask, well, what is every single direct report? How do they want to be coached? And still the answer is we have no idea, right? And there are tools that we've created for measuring those two things. And that's where a lot of, the awards are getting, a lot of accolades, sort of coming from not only the coaching industry, but also the talent development industry, in terms of this gives us new ways to think about this stuff, where every single person can have their own talent development plan around being a better coach. And it being, Google found after a 10-year study, it's the number one skill you can have is the ability to be a great coach.
Yeah, you're going to get so much better results, better engagement, engagement, retention, performance. All these things are often tied to coaching. One of the things popular in talent development now is personalized learning and meeting learners where they are and understanding their learning style and not trying to necessarily force that on people. And it's important, like you said, for managers or coaches to understand their own style, their strengths and weaknesses, and what they could be using more. You also have an assessment for direct reports or coachees so that managers can understand their preferred style. And that was really a revelation to me when I went through this and took that assessment as well, and realized like, oh, there are three or four styles that I love people to ask me questions in those areas. And there's two or three that I don't care as much about. They don't motivate me as much. And it just proved to me that like, oh, everybody has their own sort of preferred styles that they like to be coached in. And so that becomes really important as well.
Yeah, it's interesting is and you mentioned the coaching styles before. Um, when you think about how you want to be coached, most people think, oh, well, those would be the same, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, not, right? It tends to be that we're different in terms of how we coach and how we want to be coached.
Mm-hmm.
How we want to be coached often addresses the areas where um, we haven't really focused as much, or where we want to learn and grow. And so, a lot of the assumptions, right? You mentioned the educator style being the lower one because that's what you learned is what you're supposed to do. Educator ends up being one of the highest styles that people want. They want growth. They want that sort of learning or that skill set development. They want to know what their manager has experienced, but also more than that, they want to have their own knowledge activated and become sort of internalized capability. They don't just want to know about stuff. They want to apply that stuff. And that's part of what the educator style does too. And so, if you imagine every single direct report that reports into every single manager, they're going to want something different, almost like a fingerprint, right? It's a unique set of, hey, here's what value looks like to me in my relationship with my manager. And the great part to realize also is every manager is going to have a default set of styles, but they're going to have direct reports who want a variety of things. So managers need to be good at all of this stuff if they want to engage their team members in customized ways that brings out the best in them. So it's not enough to say, here's my style, I'm going to inflict it on you, right? It's either it's my way or the highway, you kind of like me or you don't, or whatnot. No, we as managers or within the talent development space, we need to train managers on being adaptable to the situation. That's what these styles are really for. And again, each individual person on their team is going to want something different. And can we adapt to that? And first of all, do we know that? And then can we adapt to that? And that's where the styles really fit in.
Yeah. So we started this, we talked about where things are breaking down, the importance of coaching, that the best way to scale coaching is getting managers or leaders in organizations to be doing coaching, that like the game of telephone, most managers learn coaching from their managers or leaders they've report to. They're not necessarily getting the training and coaching. I think when we're talking with people in talent development as we are now, it's a little bit of preaching to the choir. Our colleagues out there in talent development, they understand this challenge of promoting, talented or accomplished individual contributors to that manager role, them not getting enough guidance in how to manage or coach. There's not enough coaching going on because people have never really learned effectively how to do it. Lots of organizations are investing in leadership development programs, and one element of that is usually coaching or feedback. What have you learned in working with organizations about how to create a culture of coaching or a coaching culture in an organization so that managers are investing more time in coaching? Because my estimate is that 80% of managers fall. There's probably 10% of managers that are naturally just phenomenal at coaching and whatever else they do. 10% that are just they don't care at all and they don't want to coach their people, and then probably 80% in the middle that are like, yeah, I want to help, but I don't feel like I have time. I don't know what to do. And this is where training and development and coaching for them can be really critical. So what have you seen work really well in organizations for that?
Yeah. The the big thing is up until now we haven't had a framework to and a shared language, if you will, to what makes great coaching. Right.
Mm.
And I think that's the power of starting with great coaches and looking at it from that lens of figuring out what do the best conversations have already. but then to realize that it doesn't have to be long and involved and painful, right? I've done this with thousands of leaders, and every single leader, it doesn't matter whether you're the chief executive officer or you're even an individual contributor, people understand the language of styles when they see them and when they get them and when it plays out. They're like, oh yeah, okay, so here's where I am, here's where I'm starting from. And now I know that I need to be more of an explorer. Or, hey, I know that I avoid difficult conversations. And so I need to be willing to be more of a provocateur. And a lot of times people have, especially in the talent development world, you've done a lot of personality assessments or whatnot, right? There's strengths, and then there's DISC, and insights, and Myers-Briggs, and all kinds of stuff. I consider that a little bit like the psychological endpoints, right? You've got the managers' strengths or whatnot, and then you've got the individual contributors or whatnot. But the conversation that unfolds in between those two anchor endpoints is almost like an infinity loop. You have to dynamically adapt to whatever the conversation, whatever the context is, whatever you have to talk about that day, who it is that you're talking to. These styles allow that to unfold. And until now, we haven't really had a language to describe when to do these various things. And so it can be as simple as one question. Hey, what were you hoping to accomplish with this? Or, hey, what's your goal for this coming quarter? Or, hey, I wanted to just say, I really appreciate you and how you've been showing up lately. All of those things have different styles that I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's as easy as one question. And if you're having a conversation with your direct report, you're already using these styles. That's the funny part. The thing is, you're probably not using them as well as you could. And I think that's the power of a framework, is it puts into our awareness the things that are naturally happening, but organizes it in such a way that makes it more accessible to do it better and to do it better quickly. And I would say when most people think about talent development and integrating coaching, they're usually like, what is coaching versus what is mentoring versus what is managing or whatnot. And I would say we don't have to sort of, those distinctions kind of put people in a little bit of a tension point of, well, am I coaching or am I managing or am I mentoring? All of those things have styles already. It's just a matter of what's the pattern of how it happens and how can we be more conscious about it. And so building coaching cultures is really first starting with understanding what are these styles that are already happening, and then how do we use them a little bit better.
And how do we get managers ramped up on this? That's always the hardest part, right? Like helping them understand this and getting them to actually use it. So what have you seen work? How can L&D, talent development professionals that are listening, utilize these coaching styles to create more of a coaching culture in their organization?
Yeah, we had one group of people who were two actually talent development people in a 200-person tech company. They went through the train the trainer program, just like Andy, just like you did. And they brought it back to their company. They did 1 hour work. They gave everybody the assessment and said, even down to the front lines, hey, we want to turn everybody into a coach. So they did it. They rolled it out with a 1 hour workshop, and they had a couple like cue cards that they printed out for people and all that. In 3 months, because they were measuring engagement, they were really hoping for engagement to help them, sort of drive the things that they were hoping to do. Previous research had showed that you can expect a 24% increase in job satisfaction or engagement levels. They didn't get 24%. They got 180% increase in employee engagement scores. They were blown away with that. They continued it 2 years later. It's still at that elevated 180% increase. They've now become the most successful startup ever created in Salt Lake City, Utah, according to their evaluation. They're growing tremendously, and they're built on this foundation of the respect styles. And that inflection point happened when they realized, oh, all we need to do is start introducing this into our language in an everyday way. And people started going into their manager's office and saying, hey, can you provocateur this idea for me, right? So it can be as easy as integrating it into the leadership development stuff that you're already doing. It could be a keynote presentation, right? Andy, I know you do keynotes. I do keynotes as well, right? You could bring in Andy into your organization, say, hey, can you do a workshop on this thing, right? And help us understand what this is. You can integrate it, yourself in bringing it into your organization, right? I would recommend that there's no wrong place to start. But when people do pilot programs, they notice like people love this stuff. I did a keynote the other day for the top 175 leaders in an organization, including the chair was there. It was their big event. They had been in business for many decades, and so they brought me in. And as I spoke to them, it got such rave reviews. This Respect Styles stuff does. They're like, hey, this is going to be our big initiative for the next several years. We want to integrate this into everything that we do, how we onboard employees, and think about if an employee coming in, the manager knew what styles they wanted. From day one, they could have those most critical conversations. And then as they continue to grow and develop, the manager is having better and better conversations with them, bringing out more and more performance, right? And out of that, then they're growing their skills. They're loving their work. They don't want to go elsewhere. So your retention is better, right? You don't have the costs that go along with the lack of retention issue. And all financial metrics go up as a result of people performing at their best, right? Loving what they do, employees wanting to stay, recruiting their friends, right? Think about all the outcomes that you can get. And that starts with talent development and the decision to help managers become better coaches.
How do you see, as things are changing so much in the world of work now, and one of the big things that, if I go to these conferences or I interview people about talent development, the two biggest topics that are trending coming up now, of course, AI is one, and the other is skills of the future. We're becoming a skills-based organization. We're determining what are the most valuable skills of the future, and we need to start developing toward that. And a lot of organizations are trying to figure out, okay, what are those skills? How do we help people upskill, create more career mobility in our organization, because people want different ways to grow in their careers. What role do you see coaching taking in that, and how do the different coaching styles help with those things as well?
Yeah, what I love is as we're trending towards AI and it's sort of taking over the world of work, my awareness is people are getting swept up in how much technology can do to replace us. But when you think about the relationship, we have to be better humans to one another. That's where these conversations really unfold, right? AI should be able to organize work better than we can, right? And have all kinds of context. But unless we teach leaders how to relate better, how to integrate better, how to think better, we're not going to be able to, if you will, keep up. And I think that's also somewhat threatening to a lot of people. But AI can actually be there to support us. So one of the things we have is we've developed an AI tool to help managers generate coaching questions for specific issues that they have where they're facing. So almost like, hey, I'm working with an employee who isn't engaging, they're falling behind on their work, and I'm on the verge of firing them. What can I say to them to address this issue? It'll actually generate coaching questions in the various styles for that to give you options of how to start a conversation, because them not performing is bad for the organization. It's bad for that person in their career, and it's bad for the manager, right? Because if the manager can't manage effectively, that's on them. Right? And we say, well, it's just a bad employee, but we know that there aren't bad employees. There are really bad managers who can't bring out the best in other people. Now, perhaps there are some people that aren't a good fit, and I'll say, I get that. That makes sense. But if we think about the lion's share of why people don't perform, it's usually not on the employee themselves. It's usually on how we're interacting with them. And are we asking them the right questions? Are we giving them the right coaching? And so there's a tool that will generate coaching questions in the various styles. But here's the interesting thing is when people take the coaching styles assessment as a manager, it will actually generate coaching questions tailored to your report so that it's stretching you into using the styles that you're not normally using. So it'll generate more questions in the ones you wouldn't have thought of. But then an even further application of this is when people take the direct report preferences assessment, the manager can put in that same prompt and it will generate questions according to the person's preferences in terms of how they want to be spoken to or coached. And so you take that most challenging thing to say, but you put it into the styles that they're most receptive to, you're going to be able to have good conversations, and they're going to sound like the conversations that people want to have. So if it's a performance issue and they're high in transformer, is you could ask a question like, well, hey, here's the challenge that's going on. How could you facing this performance challenge actually be an opportunity for unlocking greater and greater potential here?
Mm-hmm.
And that wouldn't be necessarily the intuitive question you would ask, but if somebody is a high transformer style preference, that's the right thing to do, right? Like that's the right conversation for them. Or if it's around they have a high confidant preference, say, hey, how are you feeling about your performance lately? Right. And then they're going to open up and share their feelings. Well, I've been feeling really conflicted because da, 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 da. And that's what the AI tool helps to do. We at one point, Andy, had this choice. Do we as an organization want to try to replace manager conversations and be a better coach to their people?
Yeah.
But we chose, no, we don't actually want to replace humans. We want to support humans in having better conversations. And that's why our tool is set up to generate coaching questions in the various styles for the unique situation and for the unique people who are involved in order to have them have the best conversations possible. And that's really our goal around AI.
It's funny. The next question I was going to ask you is about AI coaching because it's coming up more and more, in our community when I talk with talent development people, hey, we're looking into AI coaching because it's obviously cheaper than human coaches. It can be, more in the moment responsive. What have you learned and seen about companies leveraging AI coaching versus human coaches?
Yeah, there's actually great research around this. The research shows that people don't want either or; they want both. And you're right; it's absolutely more scalable to have an AI tool to turn to help you think through various situations. To often AI tools give you advice in various ways, which may or not be good advice, but
Yeah.
but it gives people a place to turn to sort of think things through. The challenge with that, though, is it doesn't have the context of work. It doesn't help you adjust. Like if a manager is coaching and coaching well, they're adjusting to the person, they're adjusting to the context, they have the organizational sort of knowledge and awareness and cultural background to know what can work and what cannot work. And so there's a way that you can't just have, I'll call it an outsourced coach bot, think about helping the person to grow and develop in their career, especially with their manager. You need both, right? You need a place for people to turn that's scalable. And I think that's really good. And there are some good platforms out there. But it doesn't replace the conversation with their manager and having a good coaching relationship there. And it doesn't, just like we can't say, and most talent development professionals will agree with this, managers can't go, you know what, if you want to grow in your career, just go to talent development and I'm not going to do a damn thing about it. Just go, I'm just going to outsource it to you. And they're like, no, like the manager has to be involved in the evolution of their people. Well, in the same way, the manager has to be involved in being a better coach to people. And so can we augment it? Yes. Is it a replacement? No, it has that outsourcing problem that will never go away, and it will just make, honestly, more friction between employees and their managers often.
Yeah, I agree completely. And if I think about not just conversations with my own experience, I love leveraging AI for quick bits of advice on different things that I'm working on, that I'm doing. But I still want to connect with a real person to talk through situations and think about future strategy for my business and get some of their experience, et cetera. David, for people in talent development, learning and development that are thinking about building more of that coaching culture, is there anything we haven't covered? Anything else you think is important for people to think about?
Yeah, I would say it, hire people like Andy to come in and to support you in thinking about this stuff, right? There's a reason that one of the main things that we do is we train others, whether it's to bring it in house or whether it's to have people who have their own, leadership development, organizations. Why it's being embedded into more and more. Like we are now, Respect is now the official model of Allstate. Capital One is bringing it into their coaching organization as well as extension into leadership development. One of the top three in the Fortune 500 list has brought this in and gotten trained by us. There's another large healthcare company, more and more, and we've only been out for 2.5 years. And the main way that we see this impacting people's lives is through that human connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think since you already know Andy, you already like Andy, you already trust Andy, he's the right person to go to bring respect into your organization because he has that context. And I'll say, Andy, you're a standout. We love all of the people who go through our program, but as we watched you present back to us what respect is all about, we were like, dang, like give that guy a stage in an hour, and he's gonna do and deliver respect in a really high integrous, high impact kind of way. Like you definitely stand out in terms of somebody who is going to be really great at building this coaching culture within organizations. And so I would say, turn to the people that you already know who have been through this stuff. And if you want to get trained in this stuff too, you're welcome to come do that. But I would say like bringing Andy in for a keynote or through coaching with you or whatnot is a really great place to begin the journey.
Well, thank you, David, for that plug. I appreciate it. And I know that your business model obviously is to get as many people exposed to this idea and using it as possible, no matter what avenue they go through. And that could be someone in the organization goes and gets certified and brings it back, or hiring an outside coach and trainer contractor like me, or if they're really industrious, taking what they're listening to today, looking at your website, and then going and maybe trying to implement it on their own and understanding like, hey, there's different coaching styles that we need to know about. But I think it's important that to have the information and you have someone who is fully trained and really understands this to bring it into the organization. And most importantly, whatever you're doing, that you are encouraging more of that coaching culture, that getting managers to coach their people more, because as we've seen, that is the number one driver of engagement, performance, retention, et cetera. So for people that do want to find out more about the Respect coaching styles and Owl Hub, the work you're doing, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, thanks. Owlhub.com. So OWLHUB.com. And most people are like, Owl Hub, why did you pick that name? We like to say it's where wise leaders gather. So owlhub.com. So you can also connect with me on LinkedIn if that's of interest to you. But there's a whole bunch of blogs on there. We have a podcast called Owlcast, the leadership and coaching podcast. Andy has been a guest on our podcast as well. We've had other people like Adam Grant on there and others that you might know. And so there's a whole bunch of information on this stuff that I would say, if you're curious about this, those who have gone before you will tell you it gets better and better the more exposure you get to this framework. It makes sense on the surface, but when you start diving down underneath the layers, it gets really deep. So it doesn't matter if you've been just recently exposed to the concept of coaching and bringing that into leadership development, or you've been in this thing for decades. You will find an incredible amount of depth here that you can bring to your organization. And I feel very fortunate to have stumbled upon it in this way, studying some of the world's best coaches and finding out how they structure their conversations to bring out the best in others was very eye-opening for me, even though I undertook it 20 years into my coaching journey. I would say it's the thing that I've learned the most from in recent years. So
yeah, I would agree with that. It's powerful stuff. So if you want to learn more about the Respect coaching styles, go to owlhub.com. If you want to talk to me about hear my experience or talk about bringing it into your organization, feel free to reach out to me, Andy at andystorch.com. Either way, I hope you will go forth and work hard on building that coaching culture, getting your managers to do more coaching, because we all know it's going to drive more of that engagement, retention, performance in your organizations. David, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you for creating this framework. I know it's going to be really helpful for me and a lot of organizations. Thanks for spending time with us today, and I look forward to talking with you more in the future.
Absolutely. Likewise.